My dear brothers and sisters,
Good afternoon, everyone. Please take a seat. We're going to start in a very short time, in a few minutes. Please take your seat. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Please, ladies and gentlemen, take your seat. We're about to start in a few minutes. Thank you. Take your seat. Good afternoon. A warm welcome to our audience and panel guests. This event marks the highest level event to celebrate the World Day Against Child Labour, as every year during the ILC. The event will be structured around two main parts to celebrate an important moment, the 25th anniversary of the adoption of ILO Convention No. 182 on the worst forms of child labour. In the first part, we will listen to an opening statement by the Director General of the ILO, Mr. Gilbert Hungbo, followed by a video message from Nobel Peace Laureate Kailash Satyarthi, and a high-level tripartite panel to discuss the progress and challenges in real life in the eradication of child labour and its worst forms. The second part will focus on partnerships to scale up action. We will begin with a video on the regional initiative Latin America and the Caribbean Free of Child Labour, also known as RILAC, which started 10 years ago as a new way of cooperating in Latin America to eradicate child labour. This will be followed by a second high-level panel. Now we will go to the ILO Director General for his opening remarks. Mr. ILO Director General, Mr. Hungbo, you have the floor.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, this World Day Against Child labor, we celebrate, is quite an historic occasion. 25 years ago, the ILO adopted Convention 182 on the worst form of child labor. In 2020, it became the first ILO convention to reach universal ratification. With that, the world made a series of solemn commitments. A commitment to take immediate and effective steps to end child labor, particularly its worst forms. A commitment to prevent children from becoming trapped in the worst form of child labor. A commitment to remove children from the worst form of child labor and to provide them with rehabilitation, education, and social reintegration. A commitment to reach out to children at particular risk and to take account of the special situations of girls who often face a double burden, as at home more work, cleaning, cooking, and caring for others awaits them. Colleagues, today we honor the significant progress made in the fight against child labor, spurred by the adoption of Convention 182. From 2000 to 2020, hazardous work decreased by 91.5 million, i.e. from 170.5 million in 2000 to 79 million in 2020. Nearly all countries have prohibited specific types of hazardous work as required by Convention 182 as part of national strategies to tackle the worst form of child labor. And since 2008, child labor has steadily declined among children aged 12 and older. From 2008 to 2020, the percentage of children aged 12 to 14 in child labor also declined from 17% to 9%. And among children aged 15 to 17, child labor dropped from 17% to 10%. However, despite those good news, we still have a long way to go. In 2020, we saw child labor increase globally by 8 million, the first increase since we began measuring it in the year 2000. The increase was concentrated in Africa and among the youngest children, age 5 to 11. 160 million children are in child labor, 63 million girls and 97 million boys. Half are in hazardous work, and one of the worst forms of child labor. And this is 1 in 10 children, which is a lot worldwide. And why is it so, we might ask? The lack of decent work for parents and young people who are above the minimum age for work is a key factor driving child labor. But in recent times, conflicts, widespread informality, natural disasters, climate change and the COVID-19 pandemic have put children's rights under pressure as never before. Partial measures will not be enough. We must remember that all fundamental rights at work are interlinked and mutually reinforcing. Promoting them all together with universal social protection is the surest way to tackle the poverty and inequality underlying child labor. We face a particular challenge in rural areas. Children there are 3 times as likely to be in child labor as those in urban areas. 70% of child labor is found in agriculture, mostly in the family context. For millions of families, the labor of their children is essential for their small farms and enterprises. Their children suffer the injustice of child labor only to grow up and be obliged to send their own children to work. If we hope to achieve social justice, we must break this cruel cycle. Nothing short of structural transformation and a renewed social contract will accomplish it. Revitalizing rural economies and improving social service delivery to rural areas is an urgent task. We must redress the historic underinvestment in agriculture to generate decent jobs and improve livelihoods. Only then will children be able to learn the skill they need under safe conditions and without sacrificing their education. They will also be better prepared to run productive, profitable family farms as adults. In Durban 2 years ago, leaders issued a call to place the elimination of child labor at the center of economic, social, and environmental policies and chartered a comprehensive and ambitious agenda. It is hard to imagine a higher purpose than putting children first in this way. The Alliance 8.7, the Global Partnership to End Child Labor, Forced Labor, Modern Slavery, and Human Trafficking, is an invaluable platform for accelerating our efforts in this vital cause. I urge tripartite constituents and concerned organizations to join this Alliance 8.7. Dear colleagues, on this World Day, we are also calling for the universal ratification of Convention 138 on minimum age. It is an essential complement to Convention 182 in that it provides legal protections against all forms of child labor. In particular, it requires that the right to compulsory education is protected and that a national policy is developed. But we cannot be satisfied with ratification alone. We must make full implementation of the conventions our highest priority. Let this World Day against child labor be the moment we turn commitments into actions. There are 160 million good reasons to do so, as children are our future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Director General. One person who will always remind us to act on our commitments is Kailash Satyarthi, founder of the Global March Against Child Labour. Global March played a key role in the lead up to the adoption of ILO Convention number 182. Since then, the Global March has also been a key place of cooperation between NGOs, community-based organizations, and trade unions, and is an important partner for the ILO. For his work, Kailash Satyarthi was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2014. Please now let's go to his video message.
My dear brothers and sisters, congratulations on the occasion of the World Day Against Child Labour. This is not a day just to observe. This is the day when we have to introspect. Because today we are sitting on behalf of the most exploited, the most marginalized, the most neglected children on our planet. This is the day when we have to reaffirm our commitment with a deeper sense of moral responsibility and moral accountability to end this menace of child labor in all its forms. I recall that how millions of children who were in schools and who were out of schools, who were working in mines and factories and farms and fields, they marched across the world in 1998 with one demand: no more tools in tiny hands. We want education. We have to be given books and toys in our hands. Children have challenged the world leaders during the Global March and after that with a very specific ask that you are not so poor that you cannot take away tools and guns from our tiny hands and replace them with books and toys and pencils. Of course, we have made significant progress since the adoption of ILO Convention 182 on the worst forms of child labor. We all celebrated a remarkable success in the decline of child labor between year 2000 and 2016. But the first 4 years of Sustainable Development Goals, and just before the pandemic, we were all shocked when we learned that the number has grown from 152 million to 160 million. And the worst sufferers, unfortunately, are African children. And therefore, our responsibility is much more bigger. In last 10 years, we have witnessed that the number of out-of-school children in Africa has never been so big as it is today. But during those 10 years, more than $100 billion worth natural resources have been abstracted and used in the global economy. We are talking about justice, inclusion, equity in education and in economies of the world. But we are going in a different direction. More shocking is that in a number of states in the United States of America, the regressive amendments are being made, or at least being demanded, in the laws related to child labor and protection of children. This is unacceptable. This is the forum where we have to reaffirm our commitment with a sense of honesty to our children. Maybe these children are not going to come and knock on your door, dear ministers, but you have to think whose children are they. Children in any part of the world, if enslaved and trafficked in less than an animal's price, children who are losing their childhood, freedom, education and future, they are all your children. They are my children. They are all our children. We have to be compassionate for our children. We have to feel the suffering of those children as our own suffering, as they are our children. They are all our children. And take urgent action. We have to put enough resources. We have to fulfill that commitment we have made to invest enough on the eradication of child labor and ensuring education for children. One thing which has been successful in many of the developing countries, and we have also witnessed this success in Europe for over 100 years, and that is social protection programs, social protection floors. Those who are most deprived, most marginalized, those who are forced to live in chronic poverty, those families should be ensured social protection. Particularly their children have to be given that protection. That requires only $53 billion additional dollars to ensure education, healthcare, and protection for every child in every low-income country. In addition to it, out of this amount of money, protection and health and care for new mothers would also be ensured. And these $53 billion are just less than 10 days of global military expenditure. We have to prioritize the future of our children. If we are going to fail our children, if we are going to fail education, if we are going to fail Global Goal 8.7, we will fail all the sustainable goals. We would be responsible for failing all sustainable development goals. But I hope that this day will give you new energy, new conviction, and a deeper sense of urgency to support every single child and put an end to the menace, the crime of child labor in the world. Thank you very much.
Now, let us turn to our first panel on eliminating child labor, progress, challenges, and the way forward. I'm very pleased to welcome to the panel Mr. Douglas Opio, Executive Director of the Federation of Uganda Employers, and Mrs. Paula del Carmen Egusquiza Granda, Secretary of International and National Relations at the Autonomous Confederation of Workers of Peru. Mr. Younes Sekouri, Minister of Economic Inclusion, Small Business, Employment and Skill of the Kingdom of Morocco, will join us later. The first question to our panelists is, from your perspective, what is one of the key advances linked to the worst forms of child labor convention number 182? Mr. Douglas Opio, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the ILO for inviting me to speak at such an important panel, but also an extremely important day. On my part, one of the key advances that we have made, I think, has been very well highlighted by the DG. Recent events make it appear like efforts have not been yielding results, because we have seen the numbers going up. But ever since the coming into force of Convention 182, we have seen a significant decline in the number of children who are involved in child labor. In 2000, we had 246 million children involved in child labor. But of course, as I speak now, that number is 106, which has only recently gone up. So that's a clear sign that past efforts have been able to yield the results that we require. But as COVID-19 has shown us, we cannot rest. We cannot sleep, basically, not until every single child is withdrawn from child labor. So that's, for me, the most important advance that we have made. But it's also a reminder that if we slow down, the challenge is still here with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Paula del Carmen Egusquiza Granda, you have the floor.
Buenas tardes con todos.
Good afternoon to all. Director General, ladies and gentlemen, we have ratified Convention 182 and we signed it 25 years ago. It is very important because it has been universally ratified. However, that is only one step. It's the first step. It is a key convention and it requires implementation in all the countries that have ratified it. When we'd ratified it, we had to study national and international law in order to eradicate child labor. But there is something that has to be very clear. All the ILO's members have ratified this convention. Now, there may be differences between the various countries, but there is one consensus that we have reached, and that is that we all want to fight and eradicate the worst forms of labor among children and teens. As a first step, we require political goodwill, resources, and the states that are represented here have all ratified Convention 182. This convention will be fundamental and will truly mark the difference between whether we remain united in the face of the scourges that affect our children. We do have to pave the way towards decent work for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your insights. Let's now move briefly on to a question on the crucial need for the effective implementation of both of the ILO's Fundamental Convention on Child Labour. What measures need to be taken to improve the implementation of Convention number 182 and Convention number 138 on minimum age? And what might constituents and the International Labour Office need to consider doing in this regard? Mr. Douglas Opio, you have the floor.
Thank you so much once again for the opportunity. First of all, we have a number of excellent initiatives that has been put in place by the office over the years. And more recently, I speak from the case of there are about 3 projects that are currently helping us, the constituents, to deal with child labor in Uganda, which is actually quite a serious problem. The first one is CAPTSA, and then the second one is accelerating the elimination of child labor. And of course, more recently, the clear supply chain project. These initiatives have been extremely helpful for us in dealing with the issue of child labor. But we need to scale them up. Most of the interventions have been in single supply chain, like the CLEAR project is currently focusing on the coffee supply chain, but we also have other supply chains, both domestic and of course the global ones. The interventions are quite robust. For example, In the case of CLEAR, we are looking at education, we are looking at issues of social dialogue, we are looking at due diligence, but also the creation of decent work opportunities. We also have platforms that are already existing, the child labor platform, for instance, but we could strengthen the collaboration between the platform and other initiatives that exist, for instance, the Global Business Network on Forced Labor. So strengthening collaboration and expanding the interventions which are already there is extremely important. And of course, child labor, even up to now, we still have to engage in raising more awareness about the issue. Because in Africa, for instance, where child labor is more endemic, it's quite often also linked to the mentality of the people, linked to cultural practices. Even up to now, we still engage in discussing what is child labor. We still engage in the definition of child labor, which ordinarily shouldn't be a conversation we should be having now. So that means the engagement to create more awareness on issues of child labor is still extremely important. And also from the side of the employers, side of the businesses, engagement beyond their business operations is extremely important to reach out to the communities, to continue to provide support that allow children to go to school, and then also addressing informality. Informality remains a major constraint in addressing child labor. In our case, for instance, in Africa, informality is as high as 83%, and even more serious in sub-Saharan Africa at 85%. But for the case of my own country, close to 90% informality. And quite often in the informal sector, regulations basically don't exist. And people then take advantage of that to use children. So improving the business environment and making it possible for businesses, for instance, to register more easily, providing the environment that allow them to create decent job opportunities are extremely important. These are some of the issues I would like to highlight, but lastly, also very important, is the issue of monitoring and reporting. Because when we monitor and report, we give ourselves the opportunity to share good practices which are emerging on what is working and what is not working, and then together we can effectively deal with issues of child labor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Opio. Mrs. Paula del Carmen Escuiza Granda, you have the floor for this second question.
We're speaking of two conventions. First of all, Convention 182. Now, under that one, first of all, we have to acknowledge the fact that many countries have been updating their lists of dangerous and hazardous work. 12 countries in Latin America have done this. There have been legislative initiatives too. It has been recognized that it is that some fields of work are very difficult or dangerous for girls and boys. For example, in Peru, a new law has been passed, and also domestic workers legislation has been passed in Peru as well, listing hazardous activities. Now, when it comes to those activities, there are sanctions. States must establish laws in order to prevent and regulate and give sanctions to those who violate the rules. And a second aspect must be assistance to those who have suffered from wrongdoings. There is another issue which is a key issue here, and that is migrant workers, because they are highly vulnerable. Children and teenagers that work, that affect their dignity, only do so in order to survive. It is fundamental that this change. Actions must also allow children to access education. It is a need, not an option. States must guarantee the right to all children and teenagers access to high-quality education. This education must guarantee a good future and first a decent job to these children and teens. Now, as to Convention 138, we need to work in a progressive fashion. And here, modifications and movements have stagnated. All countries need to define a minimum age to enter the world of work. The system for monitoring needs to be strengthened because there are many times in which we cannot identify the children who are working. They are working in hidden contexts. Moreover, the ratification of these two conventions was done before the new forms of work that have emerged, such as platform work or works on social networks. Nowadays, many children are working at a computer, and it is difficult to identify how long they are spending at work, who the employers are, and what they are doing. Often, these children don't even go out at all. They stay for hours working at a computer, for example, working on advertisements and so on for large companies. Employers believe in the commitment to regulating the value chains. Large companies often don't have frameworks that will protect children from work. A lot of the time, such networks are based in Africa or in Latin America, and the child who is working is the last link in a very long chain. Moreover, hazardous work and vocational training must be the object of focus. Indeed, apprentices often work in situations in which they are endangered psychologically or even physically. Social dialogue must be relaunched, and we firmly believe that this has to be a priority. There must be local, national and regional social dialogue fora where all the constituents can discuss matters concerning public policies in order to eradicate forced labour and child labour. Workers in the world believe that there would not be child labour or forced labour if we all were truly committed to the creation of decent work for adults. This has to be accompanied by social protection and all the rights that are necessary for the workers. This can only be based on social dialogue, and if decent work were available for adults, then there would be no child labour. If a child has not been allowed to play, has not been allowed to study, then this child will never be able to recover the lost time. Those children will only be able to enter a world of work and be employable if they have access to education. And that is something that we all need to be committed to. The creation of decent work accompanied by all the rights necessary. This can only be achieved through laws against discrimination, collective bargaining, and so on. If adults can put bread on the table, then children can go and play and get an education. Thank you.
Minister Sekouri, thanks for joining. Minister Sekouri, from your perspective, what is one of the key advances linked to Convention number 182, and what measures should be taken to improve implementation of both of the child labour conventions? You have the floor.
Thank you, and thanks to the audience and the speakers. I'd like to start with a personal note. 25 years ago, I was part of what we call in Morocco the Parliament of Children. and a non-governmental organization chaired by Her Royal Highness Princess Lala Miriam. And I started at the time discovering the culture of children's rights. And since Morocco is one of the countries who worked a lot on children's rights, in 25 years we managed to decrease children labor by 94%. And today, less than 1.4% of the working force is children. And those who work, by the way, are not necessarily working in companies or with any kind of forced labor, but they just help their families in rural areas punctually with a couple of tasks. I think that we're all engaged for the eradication of children labor. It's important for our societies, for our communities, to be clear with the next generations and to make it clear that the place for children is school. But to do so, a country, a government has to be very up to the point in terms of mechanisms, strategies and tools. The first thing we did in 2011 is to clearly state in the Moroccan Constitution, Article 32, I think, that the government, the state, provides protection for all the citizens, including especially children, in order for them to live a normal life, a life of a child. I agree with those who just intervened and saying that the question of children is not just a question of it's not an aesthetic question. It's a fundamental question for our societies. I think that when you have a national integrated strategy, and we delivered one in Morocco, we managed to have this decrease, this phenomenal decrease in terms of labor work for children. But still, there are 2 or 3 major things that we're doing and we still need to progress or to enhance. The first one is vocational training. And the second one is to address all those who can leave school. One of the major actions that we're studying today is to provide direct support for families. His Majesty launched a program for 3.5 million families, 12 million people, 5 million children with direct aid, in order to make sure that these families have a direct aid so that their children don't go to work and they, at the opposite, go to school. The second thing is, of course, generalizing, of course, school access with the generalization of the primary and the pre-primary level. And in this perspective, we developed a very particular model that addresses today millions of Moroccans so that we could bring the age of preschool from 5 to 4, which is a tremendous effort. But it's not just a legislation dimension, it's a practical dimension with means, strategies and budgets. Vocational training is important, but the problem with vocational training is that those who get support need to have a high school degree. So what we're working on today is to foster apprenticeship and to provide subsidies for those who couldn't manage to have a high school degree. And we have today something like 30,000 people per year, and we have a program to scale it to 100,000 people. These are in general between 16 and 18 years old, and they are covered for a couple of jobs by the convention. I want to finish by saying that when you generalize social protection and you provide family allowances, especially for those who don't have wages and revenues, more than 12 million people do benefit today in Morocco from these family allowances, even if they don't have revenues. So we managed to have a solidarity system that provides money to these people. When you launch a program for housing that costs $1 billion a year, when you launch a program for direct aid for families with very low revenues, and when you renegotiate in your social dialogue a program that costs more than $3 billion, this is how you enhance the quality of life of families so that the children do not go to work. And in addition to that, of course, you reinforce the scrutiny and control of labor inspectors. We have 500 labor inspectors with very important rules, and we sensitize the companies, the Moroccan companies, also to be sure that if there is any problem with children labor, the measures are very, very hard. I don't want to last more, but all I want to say is that there is a need for a legislative framework. There is a need for close work with the judiciary system, and we have agreements on that way to signal the people and to signal those who might jeopardize children's lives. And three, of course, you need absolutely to implement voluntary policies, and these policies need to be funded. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks. No. No. Okay, Minister Sekouri wants to add a final statement.
Excuse me, I just wanted to say that on the behalf of the Moroccan government, we would like to see the opportunity to host the next International Children Conference in Morocco, if of course the process works with the board and we can follow the procedure if it's accepted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Thank you, Director Opio. Thank you, Secretary Egusguiza Granda. Before we will start with our next set of panelists, we'd like to show you a video message from the Regional Initiative Latin America and the Caribbean Free of Child Labor, which this year is marking its 10th anniversary. The regional initiative is a commitment by the countries to accelerate the process towards the elimination of child labor. At the same time, it represents an innovative cooperation instrument to consolidate and sustain progress achieved, ensuring the full exercise of children's rights in the Latin American region. We can now play the video message from the Regional Initiative Latin America, please. Do we have the video? Thank you for your patience. The video message from the regional initiative is on its way.
Muy buenos días para todos y todas. La Iniciativa Regional América Latina y el Caribe, plataforma de acción intergubernamental y tripartita, en la cual los gobiernos,
workers' organizations and employers' organizations are actively working to advance towards the achievement of Latin America and the Caribbean free of child labour, comprising 31 countries in the region, together with employers and workers' organisations. It is concrete proof that working together is key to forge ahead in the prevention and eradication of child labour. In 2024, we're commemorating our 10th anniversary. Since the ratification of Convention 182, Latin America and the Caribbean have reduced by half the number of working children. In Colombia, the decrease in the last 4 years has been considerable, from almost 600,000 children in child labour in 2019 to 288,794 in 2023. And this demonstrates that we are on the right path. But it's not enough. We need to continue making efforts and broadening support to fulfill the commitment which we've all shouldered towards a region free of child labour. This work, proposals and actions of the regional initiative are expressed in the virtual mural which we are introducing today. Through that, we invite you to join efforts for the roadmap which the region has set out, with the regional vision, with the commitment of each of the countries and social sectors, and with the support of development partners. We will make Latin America and the Caribbean free of child labour. This is a very special moment in which we celebrate the efforts and progress made in the fight against child labour in our region. We are 10 years into the creation of the initiative of a tripartite effort characterised by steadfast commitment and unquestionable belief. In order to reach target 8.7, we will all work together for this cause. By 2020, we'll have achieved a major reduction in the numbers, but the pandemic revealed the structural flaws which are entrenched in our countries and the well-known inequalities that we're familiar with generated by the prevailing system. We have a great debt to our children and the obligation to redouble our efforts to achieve their development. For this reason, although we celebrate the universal ratification of ILO Convention 182 today in the framework of its 25th anniversary, it's essential that we comply with requirements for its implementation. At the same time, it's imperative to create national tripartite spaces for dialogue and the combat against child labour. As trade unions, we have to emphasise that we have a great deal to contribute as individuals or organisations with clear development proposals that are essential to guarantee decent work for adults, as well as social protection, education, health and quality, public care services for every child and adolescent in our nation. Thank you. As employers, we are proud to celebrate 10 years of the regional initiative and show how tripartite dialogue works and how it allows us to collaborate and design concrete tools to combat child labour in Latin America and the Caribbean. The initiative gives us a space which enables us to renew our commitment through our actions and to join together with experience so that we can take an innovative focus which we can bring as employers to counter child labour. And that's why we call on other organisations to join with this initiative to strengthen our capacities as social partners and learn from experts on the basis of experience in the region. Child labour is an unacceptable reality, which is sometimes visible and sometimes not, but always leaves traces in adulthood. For this reason, the region of Latin America and the Caribbean is united on a shared pathway to eliminate child labour once and for all.
To reduce the amount of children that are in child labour.
We've already overcome the most evident aspect of child labour in our regions, and now we need to address these structural problems. We're increasingly going to see where child labour is and how to eliminate it. 10 years ago, we decided to join forces in a tripartite alliance called the Regional Initiative Latin America and the Caribbean Free of Child Labour, where governments, employers and workers' organisations, along with an invaluable contribution of the ILO and our development partners, worked tirelessly to end child labour. For me, it was a dream. We did not think we would get this far. We're working together towards a common goal, which is the reduction and eradication of child labour. Having a coordinated effort from all countries is, I think, quite unusual. Many voices from many countries, from 3 sectors, but with one message: no child labour. As part of our 10th anniversary celebrations, we have co-created a mural entitled 10 Years #Joining Efforts for a Region Without Child Labour, which represents our joint pathway and our commitment to end child labour in all its forms. Let's act on our commitments, end child labour.
I am now pleased to welcome to the second panel on partnerships to scale up action, Mrs. Karianne van Gennep, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Social Affairs and Employment of the Netherlands, Mrs. Thea Lee, Deputy Under Secretary for International Labour Affairs, United States Department of Labour, and Mrs. Claudia Fuentes Julio, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Chile to the United Nations Office at Geneva, and the chair of Alliance 8.7, the Global Partnership to End Forced Labour, Modern Slavery, Human Trafficking and Child Labour. Let me first turn to the two ILO member states that have been engaged in fostering partnerships and international collaboration in the fight against child labour. Questions to Deputy Prime Minister and Minister, Mrs. Karianne van Gennep. Minister, we would like to hear from you regarding successes in the elimination of child labour, as well as where you see international cooperation moving in the near future.
Thank you, moderator. Let me start by saying that my heart is heavy. As a mother of 4 daughters, I find the numbers that we're hearing today and every year again devastating, unacceptable. 160 million children trapped in child labour. That's 9 times the size of the Dutch population. 9 times. Can you imagine how many children it is that are working every day while they should be going to school, while they should be having a childhood, while they should be playing outside? They're working day in, day out, 9 times the size of the Netherlands. But we cannot allow ourselves to be pessimistic. We need to be energetic, optimistic, proactive. We need to join forces. And I truly believe that we have the key at hand to ensure that every child can be a child and that every child can have a better future. And I also truly believe that cohesive societies, and it was said before in the first panel, can only really be developed if we invest in our children. And investing in our children means saying no to child labour. So we need to join forces. We need to ensure that we have global cooperation and that global cooperation is practical, tangible, inclusive. And I would like to spotlight the tremendously important role that the ILO plays in eliminating child labour. First, ILO's normative instruments help create an enabling environment for the elimination of child labour. And we need these fundamental principles and rights at work. Second, by providing technical support. This is where change at the workplace happens and where livelihoods can be improved. And third, by fueling Alliance 8.7 with continuous and increased efforts. And I want to thank Ambassador Fuentes, who recently took the lead in advocating 8.7 in the Pact for the Future. And we as the Netherlands, we fully support highlighting the abolishment of forced and child labour in the upcoming UN Summit of the Future and the Social Summit next year. And I hope you will all join us there. As the Netherlands, we are a proud pathfinder country of 8.7, of Alliance 8.7. It fuels collective advocacy and it's also a unique way of cooperation. Of countries across traditional regional groups and of civil society beyond traditional stakeholders. And today, all these partners need to accelerate progress. And we need to make sure that national governments and national stakeholders are in the driver's seat. It's also eminent that learning experience, what works and what doesn't work, are openly shared, fostering peer-to-peer learning. And to your question, I have one example to share with you. The Netherlands is a proud founder and funder of the ILO Excel program, who doesn't know the abbreviation, Acceleration Action for the Elimination of Child Labour in Supply Chains in Africa. And as a result of Accel in Côte d'Ivoire, the food and agribusiness Olam now pays the national health insurance premium for the farmers they work with. And that shows the willingness of the private sector to contribute to the income security of the farmers, which consequently then decreases the risk of child labour. Investing in the parents means a better future for the children. And this practice of employers supporting social protection besides the government is similar to the one in the Netherlands, where employers do pay social security contribution for their workers. Because in the end, we all benefit from healthy workers. So let's nurture and support development of such innovative ideas and practical solutions with the cooperation of all the different players. So to end, colleagues, my heart is still heavy, thinking of all those children trapped in child labour every day and today at this very moment. But I'm also hopeful as we sit here and as I see all the many organisations, partners, governments who want to help stop child labour. Let's make sure we leave no child behind.
Thank you, Mrs. Van Gennep. Questions to Mrs. Thiali. Mrs. Lee, could you outline how your government's engagement contributed to improving the situation in relation to child labour? What do you see as important lessons learned for the way forward? Also in relation to other fundamental principles and rights at work.
Thank you so much for the question, and good afternoon to all of you. Let me say what a great pleasure it is for me to be here with all of you today to commemorate the World Day Against Child Labour. When reflecting back on the last 25 years, we have made significant progress. 25 years ago, most countries did not have national action plans on child labour. Few had carried out national child labour surveys, and most companies lacked a clear understanding of the risks or any viable action plan to address child labour and labour rights abuses in their supply chains. But today, as we've discussed, ILO Convention 182 is universally ratified. Dozens of countries have developed national plans and roadmaps for action on child labour. And more companies are taking concrete steps to address labour exploitation in their supply chains. And we see due diligence and other legislation requiring greater accountability in many countries. Many more companies are entering enforceable brand agreements that center the role of workers in monitoring and addressing labour abuses in supply chains. While progress has been made, we have to concede that major challenges remain. For example, we know that even in the United States of America, we still have much work to do, and we are not reluctant to say so. Our Wage and Hour Division is strongly committed to monitoring and enforcing child labour laws. Recently, they imposed a $1.5 million fine on one company that had over 100 incidents in its work. We're also using every tool at our disposal, including the hot goods provision, which prevents goods made with child labour from crossing state lines. And we're also looking to make sure that we are holding parent companies accountable even when they subcontract out labour issues. As the head of the Department's Bureau of International Labour Affairs, I lead our global efforts to advance workers' rights and combat abusive forms of labour. I'm very proud that the Biden-Harris administration has put workers and their well-being at the center of our work, including through the Presidential Memorandum on the Global Labour Strategy. At the Department of Labour, we address labour exploitation through our reporting on child and forced labour, through trade enforcement and monitoring, by engaging with governments and other actors, and by investing technical assistance funding to build local capacity and pilot effective approaches. Our reporting and research bring attention to problem areas, and our technical assistance can be instrumental in building capacity and developing solutions. And the trade leverage helps focus both governments and companies. And the ILO has been a strong partner in all of this work. We've also supported external research, including 90 national child labour surveys and supply chain tracing, to build the global knowledge base and data-informed action. We have learned a lot from almost 3 decades of funding technical assistance projects in about 100 countries, including the importance of taking a holistic approach to addressing root causes of child labor and forced labor, as Director General Huang Bo said. We found that engagement with unions and workers' organizations is key. Working parents need the freedom to organize and bargain collectively so they can advocate for decent wages and working conditions, afford childcare and education, and survive economic shocks. To advance workers' rights, we are very proud to support and partner with other governments and other actors through important initiatives like the U.S.-Brazil Partnership for Workers' Rights, the Multilateral Partnership for Organizing Worker Empowerment and Rights, Alliance 8.7, and the Global Coalition for Social Justice. As we commemorate World Day today, I want to challenge each of us to do more. Governments and multilateral institutions need to hold companies accountable for child labor issues throughout global supply chains. We know that we will not ultimately succeed in eradicating child labor unless we are also united in strengthening all the fundamental principles and rights at work, especially freedom of association and collective bargaining. Let's not meet again in 25 years to regret another missed target or failed effort. Children have only one chance at childhood. It's up to us to get it right the first time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Lee. I would now like to turn to Ambassador Claudio Fuentes-Julio, Chair of Alliance 8.7. Ambassador, following the adoption of the UN Sustainable Development Agenda 2030, Alliance 8.7, the global partnership to end child labor, forced labor, modern slavery and human trafficking, was launched 8 years ago. Bearing in mind the points raised by the previous panelists, how can the Alliance contribute to improving implementation of the child labor conventions?
Thank you, Isabel. It is truly a pleasure to be with all of you today as we mark World Day Against Child Labor. Alliance 8.7 was created to drive progress to achieving SDG 8.7, which is to end forced labor, modern slavery, human trafficking by 2030, and to end child labor in all its forms by 2025. The Alliance aims to achieve this by bringing together partners, generating new commitments to accelerate progress, coordinating action, sharing good practices, and monitoring progress. In 2018, the Alliance launched the Pathfinder Country Strategy, through which governments turn their commitments into action on the ground through the adoption, implementation, and reporting of national SDG 8.7 roadmaps. 37 countries are or have manifested interest in becoming Pathfinder countries. 23 of these countries have adopted roadmaps and are reporting on progress made. One key area in which Pathfinder countries commit to take action is on promoting and working towards the ratification and full implementation of relevant international human rights standards and obligations, including international labor standards on child labor and forced labor. With 2025 deadline established by Target 8.7 upon us, pretty close, now is the time for deepening our engagement with Pathfinder countries towards actions to end child labor with urgency. The Pathfinder country process is now well established, so it is time more than ever to go further, including by strengthening the implementation of the Child Labor Convention. I would like to stress 3 critical elements. The first one, we must make sure that on-the-ground action is undertaken in an inclusive manner, bringing together first and foremost our tripartite constituents, as well as all other concerned stakeholders, including UN agencies, civil society organizations, survivors and survivor networks, private sector actors, academia, and development partners. Second, Alliance 8.7 has established a Pathfinder country accountability framework to keep track of progress made and to assess where countries are in need of further support. By reporting on their progress, on a yearly basis. Pathfinder countries are sharing their experiences so that efforts everywhere can be continuously improved and lessons learned shared as widely as possible. Third, child labor cannot be tackled in isolation, and it is linked to broader issues ensuring decent work for parents, social protection for all, free and quality education for all children, and effective law enforcement. The Pathfinder country strategy brings the added value of a whole-of-government approach, bringing together Ministry of Labour, Education, Agriculture, Social Protection, and others to ensure the mainstreaming of child labour issues throughout government agendas. While sustained progress has been made in specific countries and regions, globally we are at crossroads, with an increase in the number of children in child labour. As you know, and I think every other speaker before me has stated, we have now 160 million children suffering from child labour. I want once again this number to sink in your conscience, because we are speaking about 1 in 6 children around the world. This brings an urgent imperative for all countries, including Alliance 8.7 Pathfinder countries, to scale up action and ensure the effective implementation of these fundamental conventions. As President of the Alliance, I have a commitment. I will continue all our efforts through both high-level advocacy and action on the ground to end child labour in all its forms and ensure that the rights of each and every children are protected.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. I thank our panelists. Before closing the event, I would like still to give opportunity to 3 speakers from the floor to address us briefly, please. I would first like to give the floor to the Minister of Labour of Thailand, Mr. Pipat Rajakiprakarn, to say a few words. Minister, you have the floor. Thank you.
The Royal Thai government acknowledges that the root cause of child labour are poverty and lack of access to education, the promotion of social protection for all, and social justice are means to successfully reduce and eliminate child labour. I trust that Thailand's commitment to the elimination of child labour is globally recognized. Since the ratification of C-182 in 2001, the government pursue its effort to implement the National Action Plan on the elimination of child labour in Thailand to address challenges at local and national level. The key activity in its latest edition for year 2023 to 2027 include promoting access to education, service for children and families, and enhancing effective labour inspection. We realize that we cannot achieve SDG target 8.7 or eliminate child labour without decent work of adults. Therefore, improving the quality of work life of parents and adults is our priority. This is why we need to raise the minimum wage as a means to improve working conditions, promote jobs creation, and expand social protection. We believe that this will prevent children from prematurely entering the labor market. Distinguished delegate, I am delighted to share with all of you today that as we discussed in this room, my home country is commemorating the World Day Against Child Labor. We confirm once again our joint commitment as effort to ending child labor in Thailand. Thank you.
I would now like to give the floor to Mr. Daniel Maurate, Minister of Labour and Employment of Peru, to say a few words. Mr. Maurate, you have the floor. Please be brief. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Muy buenas tardes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Child labour is a cause of poverty and a consequence of poverty. Consequently, this is something that we need to address. It's a structural problem for all countries. Unfortunately, it's a problem which cannot be resolved with a law. It cannot be resolved overnight. So it's very important to work assiduously to address these issues. Focusing on the informal sector, we need a new social contract, as Gilbert Wangbo, Director General of the ILO, has proposed. We need social dialogue between those who represent those with jobs today and between employers and governments. And they need to be thinking of those who don't have jobs, who are poor, and who subject children to child labour. We need to cut the poverty chain, because poverty leads to poor families. Children from poor families are condemned to continue that chain with more poverty and poor families. We need programs which get resources to poor people. In Peru, we do have a program, Yankasu Peru, which delivers economic resources mainly to women. But it's not a subsidy, it's not a gift. It's given in exchange for work on small-scale infrastructure projects. But we also need to improve enforcement to eradicate child labour from the production chain. We've developed an action plan with a protocol and special regulations for enforcing measures against child labour. We've also created a certificate for businesses who have developed production policies without including child labour, so that they can be certified as child labour free. And it's also important to establish standardisation protocols so that we can distinguish child labour from child appropriate activities to develop cross-cutting skills for the future. It's important that encounters such as this one, where employers, workers and governments come together, lead to compulsory reports about progress on child labour so that we can move from words to facts. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, before closing, I would like to give the floor to the Deputy Prime Minister of Belgium, Mr. Pierre-Yves Dermagne, to say a few words. Thank you. Deputy Prime Minister, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup et avant tout, je voudrais vous remercier pour l'organisation de cette.
Thank you very much for organising this session. Indeed, we have listened to some remarkable statements here. As you know, Belgium is particularly attached to standards and the international conventions that apply to the world of work. And we had Mr. Michel Onsen, who is the Director General of Labour from Belgium. And we are glad that the Convention 182 was universally ratified, and we do hope that it will also be the case for for Convention 132 as well. Unfortunately, nowadays we are facing terrible realities, and many of you have mentioned this afternoon. Last year at the ILC, I mentioned the fact that that child labour is increasing across the globe. Belgium has also been impacted by this phenomenon, and fortunately, the Labour Inspectorate has dismantled a mechanism in Belgium that was focusing on child labour. And we do believe that such conventions are the foundational pillars of our organisation, and I would like to thank you very much for your work. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur. I would like now to all of the speakers and panelists for their contributions, those of you here in the room for coming, and those online for following the live stream of the event. While on June 12 the world's attention is drawn to the issue of child labour, we should remember that the fight for children's rights goes on each and every day, so that not too far in the future we can finally reconcile child labour to history. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention.
Ya la llevan.